Hello, welcome to Reddit Roast number 54. Mal, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sam. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Why don't you walk us through the profiles we've got in today's roast?
So today's roast is consists of a Chinese materials science engineer who isn't looking for IB consulting. I know that that's two goals we see all the time from engineers. We've got
Mhm.
two Indian MBA applicants who were discouraged by their admissions consultants from applying. We've also got a mid-30s FAANG analyst who was disqualified from school due to a low GPA. And we have a bonus question. Can you go from circus clown to investment banking?
Okay. So quite a, I think my take of today's batch is quite a messy week this week. It's
Yeah.
it's carnage. Like all of these profiles have got something wrong with them. They're panicking. Maybe they've had advice that's like saying, give up. And also, I decided to do my preparation today in a cafe. So I've gone old school and I have my notes printed out and we'll be working from these. Now, let's just hope I can read my own handwriting. And if I can, hopefully it will be a good roast today. So, who have we got first?
All right. Our profile one for today is a 34-year-old male Chinese applicant who holds a US green card. He has a bachelor in engineering and a master's in material science from a top 30 US school. His work experience, 9 years of total work experience, with 5 years as a materials engineer, 4 years as a product manager at a leading North American company. Highlights: launched multiple industry first products and managed cross-functional teams. Some more in their goals. OP wants to pivot into product strategy or innovation or portfolio roles at larger global or tech adjacent companies. OP is
Hmm.
not targeting IB or consulting. Long term, he wants to get into product or strategy leadership. Um, some concerns: GPA is 3.2. OP is also older with 34 years of age and is coming from a relatively niche industry. What do you think?
Hmm. Yeah, let's give that an upvote first and then go through it as we always do with a bit of a profile evaluation first. So, demographic first. 34-year-old male with 9 years of experience now. Let's say he applies in round one in like 4 months for the following year. It's going to be like 10, 11 years of work experience. He's on the older side for sure. Um, Academics. I think I get if I get this right, it's a 3.2 undergrad GPA.
Mhm.
We know for the M7s, the average is around sort of 3.6 or thereabouts. But also we don't know if that is a I don't think we know if that is a oh yeah, well, the master's is from a US school, but I
Yeah,
don't
we
think we
don't.
know whether the engineering bachelor's is in the US.
Yeah.
If it's from the US and it's actually a 3.2 GPA on a 4.0 scale, and the schools have to submit that to their rankings, it's a little bit more negative than if you've converted that yourself. Okay, we don't know on the GMAT yet, I don't think. Is that correct? Yeah, here. How important would the GMAT be for improving my chances? Um, the answer to that we can talk about in a little bit more detail, but basically high. It's going to be important when your GMAT, when your GPA is only 3.2,
Mhm.
your GMAT is going to carry quite a lot of weight. Okay, professional. Now I think this is where this profile gets a bit more interesting. Materials engineer, product manager at a leading North American company in building materials. This is the kind of industry background that schools like to see. There are not that many people with this background applying to business school, in the same way as you have millions of consultants applying, a lot of investment bankers applying. This sort of profile the schools don't see very often. And it does look like OP's had quite a successful career with quite a few jumps. Um, well, I'm assuming there's not an explicit mention of promotions, but I think as we look at the outcomes and the achievements in more recently, I think we can assume there's been some promotions in there. So that professionally is where where OP's profile is, I think, really strong. No mention of extracurriculars at all. I hope that's not because traditionally and sort of historically, somebody who's Chinese in the US maybe doesn't have as much kind of focus on extracurriculars, and there maybe isn't any. And if there's no extracurriculars, that could be an issue, but we don't know for
Mhm.
sure. So I'll leave that one sort of hanging. Goals. Pivot into strategy, innovation, portfolio roles at a larger global tech adjacent companies. This makes perfect sense. This makes really perfect sense. OP has obviously thought quite hard about this career kind of narrative and where he's going to head. But long-term product or strategy leadership, I mean, that's just a continuation of what he's doing already, I think, right? Or at least just to kind of, if you do this role well, and you just kind of get promoted and promoted and promoted, you end up in your long-term goal. It's not really saying much. It's a bit of a waste of an opportunity here. I'd like a slightly sexier, slightly more interesting, ambitious longer-term goal. Now, I do want to make a point on this, not targeting IB or consulting, prioritizing work roles with better work-life balance. Nothing wrong with this at all. Seriously, a lot of people go into this process and say, oh, a lot of business schools place people into consulting. Therefore, I need to write consulting as my goal. Rubbish. Lean into the unique angle of your profile. You've got this interesting background, this material science background. Lean into that. That's what the schools want to hear about, because that's what differentiates you from the thousands of consultants who are applying. And again, make your short and long term goals unique and relevant to this specific narrative rather than trying to fit a mold that you think they want. Don't do that. Okay. So overall, on the weak side, potentially extracurriculars, ORM, grades not ideal. On the strong side, the work experience is interesting, and the GMAT is an opportunity to offset the GPA. That's how I see
Mhm.
this profile overall. A bit more work to be done, but has potential.
Okay, and what kind of schools do you think would be right for OP? Like, I think OP wants to know if M7, T15, or
Mhm.
T25, what should he aim for?
Yeah, look, I've got here on my notes T10 as I think the upper end. It'll come down a bit to GMAT, can't really say. But I think a T10 is a solid target. What do I mean by that? That's like the kind of, I'm talking about the Yales, the Cornells of the world. So not M7, Yale,
Mhm.
Cornell, NYU, that kind of level. Good schools, really, really good schools. Not quite M7. I don't think there's enough here for for M7 personally. I might be wrong, but T10 is where I see OP really kind of should be your reach. T15 definitely doable. T25 I would consider those safe. Maybe scholarship schools, depending again on how your GMAT comes out. I think that's a sort of realistic range, somewhere between T10 and T20, kind of in there.
Okay. And how important, I know you've answered this briefly, but how important do you think the GMAT is for improving OP's chances?
Yeah, let me be direct on this. A 3.2 GPA for undergrad in particular is not especially strong. It's
Mhm.
partially offset by by professional experience, etc., but it's not the GPA on its own is not a good indicator of your academic ability, and that is where your GMAT is going to come in. I would like, ideally, if your GPA is a little bit below the average, I would like the GMAT to be a little bit above the average. For these kind of T10 schools, we're talking, high 600s should be OP's target here. Maybe even, if you can get it there, low 700s would be really nice. That would offset the GPA, and that combined with a good work experience would put OP in a really strong position for applications. The one other thing that I would add, because kind of OP is talking now about improving chances. A couple of other things I'd like to add to this. One of the ways that you can kind of monetize, so to speak, this high work experience is really lean into your leadership experience. One of the
Mhm.
things that you bring as an older applicant, hopefully to the school, is direct management experience of other people, of budgets. That is how you kind of justify being older as an MBA applicant. So make sure you lean into that in your resume, in your application essays, show them that you've managed people and you've had responsibilities. That's one. And two is that point I made about extracurriculars. There
Yeah.
might be some that just haven't been mentioned, but if there haven't been any mentioned, that's going to be a make or break. That's going to be a big factor. Um, Build up your extracurriculars in the next few months between now and yeah, a September application. Wouldn't wait any longer than September because you're already an older applicant. You need to get it done this year, this round. But yeah, it'd be nice to see some extracurriculars in there. It doesn't have to be massive, but some sort of community involvement that you can really, make prominent in your application essays and resume would be beneficial.
All right. Okay. I think that's all of OP's questions.
Cool. That's everything I had on my paper notes. So next profile, let's do it.
Next profile. All right. Need honest advice. That's here for 27 female Indian, 5+ years of work experience from a marketing background, currently working at a not-for-profit for category promotion. Applying in the class of 2027. MBA is applying this year. Oxford OP has been interviewed and rejected. ISADE GRE is too low. They said try again. Current GRE is 311. Job position senior brand executive at a small office, not really a manager. OP is planning on giving it another go with the GRE and applying to 1-year programs only. OP, the goal is to break into consulting and have a reputed job, at least in the Asian market. A little bit of lament in there. OP's feeling extremely lost in her career, doesn't know how to proceed. And the counselor said she's too old to get an MBA now and that the US doesn't make sense. What would you have to say to her?
Okay. First, let's give an upvote. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. Now, profile evaluation from the start. Indian female, definitely ORM, overrepresented. Lots of Indian females applying, but not too old for an MBA. So I'm going to directly and confidently contradict what OP's counselor has been saying, which is that 27 is somehow too old for an MBA. That's absolute rubbish. Average work experience of these MBA programs, these European programs, is about 5 years. 27 minus 5 is 22. 3 or 4 years of undergrad. She's bang on the average for work experience. She's actually at the sweet spot in terms of her career for an MBA. So ignore that counselor and sack him because that's rubbish. Next, academic. Right. I don't think we have the information here about the undergrad GPA, undergrad grades, right? So it's hard to give a conclusive evaluation academically without that. But I'm hesitant to say that if it's not mentioned, it's probably not great. And if ESADE are also saying, scores are too low, that suggests the 311 is too low given the GPA. To me, this says the academics are not great. And this is probably the weakness of this profile. So I would say, that 311 is not ideal. And I would be, the conversation that you've had around sort of redoing that. I think it was ESADE that said redo that. Saeed said the score's too low. I agree. And I'm not surprised.
Sari said that, yeah.
Oh, ESADE, sorry. Saeed said, okay, I'm getting mixed up. ESADE said that.
Saeed just rejected her outright.
Saeed, but interviewed. So the score would have been taken into account pre-interview, but the interview wasn't good enough to offset a bad score. And ESADE have just come out directly and said, no, it's too low.
Yeah.
So I definitely think there is the GRE upside there. That is fair. And OP, I think, is already aware of that, right? GRE is the biggest drawback. Now, professional. I think there are some promotions in here. OP is a senior brand executive, and I think we said with about 5 years of experience. So there has been some promotions and some career development in there, which hopefully can be framed quite impressively and will make the resume look fairly solid. But in terms of impact, I don't really have much of a sense of what OP has achieved. That will be key for the career goals essays. Be really important. And so a bit of an unknown there. OP, try and look back at your career and think about what are the 3 or 4 most impactful things you've done. Condense those into key stories. And if you get interviewed again, use those. And for your next application, they'll feature in your essays as well. That's the professional piece. Extracurriculars, again, no mention of this.
Yeah.
It's if you're considering submitting a profile to Reddit to get reviewed. If you have extracurriculars, say so. If you don't have extracurriculars, say so as well, because we can help you offset and kind of mitigate this. But we have no idea whether she has extracurriculars or not, and so not much I can say on that. I'm going to assume that it's not ideal. I'm not going to give her the benefit of the doubt. So goals. I don't like these goals at all. At all. Let me go on a little rant here. Anyone who's watched this before will know consulting goals require consulting credibility. They need to be credible. There's a lot of people applying with consulting goals, and among them, people who've already worked in consulting. Even more so, people who've already worked at an MBB. And among them, people who are already sponsored by the MBB to do their MBA. They're going to be, the consultancy is going to pay their entire tuition fees, which means the schools don't have to give those people scholarships, which means they can save the scholarships for other people. And those people have a guaranteed job offer to go back. Why in all of hell's name would you put yourself against those people if you don't have any consulting experience? Those are shit goals. Pardon my French. Fix it. Do better. Overall, we might have a problem here.
Yeah. So OP feels like the GRE is the biggest drawback here.
Yep.
She gave up on the M.
It's hard to say. It depends a lot on whether she has achieved higher scores in her practice tests. If she's been scoring 320 plus, in her practice tests, and she just had a bad day on this score, that's one thing. In which case, yeah, definitely take it again. Definitely keep trying. You've got it in you. You just need a good test day. But if OP is now on her fourth test and is consistently scoring 311, then probably pivot the focus on extracurriculars, on other things. Is my answer to that. I hope that's clear. Also, it depends a little bit on whether that GRE score is verbal or quant leaning. If that's a high verbal and a low quant score, it's even more of a problem.
Yeah, especially as OP's from a marketing background.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that the 2-year lock-in period and the money is really worth it for US MBA?
Yeah, I would say for a person with a sort of non-traditional background, I think it's a really, really big gamble for OP to take 2 years out and go to America. My smell on this is if the work does it say something like a non-profit somewhere? Is that in the comments?
I think that's in the first line.
That's in the first line.
It.
Oh yeah, currently working as a non-profit. Right. I'm going to sensitively assume that OP needs to borrow quite a lot of the MBA cost here. OP's not rolling in money for sure. So taking 2 years out of your work and probably best part of $200,000 US dollars of debt.
Yeah.
Pretty big gamble for OP to take. I wouldn't blame her for being like, nah, that's too much. I wouldn't want to do it. If OP was almost sort of semi-guaranteed, was already in consulting and semi-guaranteed a good consulting role after graduating, that would be one thing. But I don't see that at all. So frankly, I think OP is doing exactly the right thing, focusing on the European schools. Shorter programs, less expensive, good ROI, but less upfront capital. I think that really does make sense.
And what do you think? So you mentioned the GRE. What else can OP do to improve her chances?
Got my little list here. One, the extracurriculars I mentioned not there. Don't just start something new from scratch. Best to build out something you're already doing. If you've got any connection to it, well, she's already got a connection to a non-profit actually. Yeah. So there's probably some quite work parallel, work adjacent extracurriculars that she'd get involved in relatively easily. That's one thing. Another thing is like, what are you already doing outside of work? And how can you turn that into a better extracurricular? If you're already running, create a
Yeah.
running group. And then all of a sudden you've got a running club and an X number of members and a Facebook page. And hell, make a website. And now you've got an extracurricular. So ECs is one thing. GRE, I've already mentioned that, very, very clear. I'd be really aiming for 320, at least sort of 318 to be seriously competitive. And then the other thing is
Mhm.
international experience, which isn't mentioned at all. The European programs and the UK programs in particular really value international experience. INSEAD and LBS in particular are going to be looking for this. INSEAD specifically say they want a second European language, if possible, European language, French, Spanish, Portuguese. That's the kind of background they're looking for. And I have no sense of whether OP has been abroad. My guess is no. So international experience, if you can get it, would be outstanding here. Particularly, just you can't just flip a switch and get a job in France. I get that, but start maybe putting yourself forward for international engagements where you're working alongside people from other countries. Those are the sorts of engagements that you can use to kind of semi compensate for a lack of direct international experience. And those are things that these programs will also be looking for. So
Yeah.
worth a feature, worth mentioning. The non the other European programs that are less worried about the international experience, basically the slightly lower ranked European programs, the ESAs of the world, HEC to some extent, IE in Madrid. These are sort of European. IMD is another one. These are European programs that are going to be worth it from an ROI perspective, not too expensive up front, and aren't explicitly filtering for international experience to quite the same extent. So I'd be opening the conversation to those schools as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
That's all of OP's questions.
good. Okay,
So,
let's dive into the next profile. 13 schools.
13 schools. Accepted to only one. So OP's applied to all of the M7s except MIT, UCLA, Haas, USC, Ross, Johnson, NYU, Yale. Waitlisted after interview at Columbia. Ross rejected at UCLA and Haas, and they pushed him towards a part-time MBA.
Mhm.
And NYU and USC, OP had an incomplete application. And finally, OP was accepted to Cornell, to Johnson, with a 70K scholarship. OP's a US applicant, very low GPA from a state school, 2.5 with disqualification. Then took 6 classes with a 3.8 GPA at another school a few years ago. 339 GRE though, that's amazing. 10 years of work experience in IT, last two at FAANG. Goal is to dual recruit at MBB, but open to tier 2 consulting and in tech product management. OP was also accepted to the consortium, but did not receive a fellowship at Johnson. Mid-30s, no kids, and is considering taking the Johnson offer, but yeah, can't really stomach the 100K in debt at this age. So there are three options that OP has, and he wants you to help him decide that. One, go to Johnson, take the 70K, go to Johnson. Two, reapply round one next year in hopes for a full ride. And three, aggressively look for full-time opportunities at FAANG or in consulting for the next 3 to 6 months. What do you think?
Mm. Okay, so before I answer those questions, let me give you an overview of how I see the profile. 13 schools. Your recommenders must hate you. That's okay. Right, demographic. I'm not sure we know a huge amount, do we? We know domestic, mid 30s. We know on the older side, 10 years of experience in IT, but not much more. Basically, the key there is the age. That's a lot of work experience for an MBA. probably a little bit too much to the point where it's the schools are thinking you're probably better suited to an EMBA or a part-time program, which is what the schools are saying, right? They pushed him towards the part-time MBA here. So I can see why that is. That's the age. So that's demographics, not ideal for sort of top programs. Academic, bit messy. Um, Disqualification, 2.5 GPA. This is not doing their undergrad stats any favors at all. 339, on the other hand, is very high, and that is doing them a favor. And so
And
you
then
think about
OP
this from,
also, sorry, OP also did take classes to improve that GPA. Got a 3.8.
yeah, okay. Now I think what's happened, I'm not entirely sure here, but I think what's happened is midway through the state school, disqualified, took up classes elsewhere to get, and those had a high GPA and basically kind of use those credits to cobble together a degree. I'm not sure exactly, but look, whatever, the schools are going to look at that and think, oh God, like, is this candidate going to be able to survive an MBA, an MBA curriculum? And also which stat are we going to have to submit to the rankings? If a school already has a very high GPA in their cohort so far that they've built, they might be willing to overlook that, especially if they need to raise their GRE average. So there's that sort of. It seems to be that's kind of the theme that's come about here. On the professional side, 10 years of experience, as I say, quite a lot, all at major companies. That's helpful in terms of brands. The last two being FAANG. Now, on a contract is not ideal. I understand that why it's the case and the job market is what it is. But the fact that it's on a contract is not ideal, and it's not going to necessarily fill them with inspiration and confidence that you're going to be able to secure a full-time role after the MBA. TBD. That's on the professional side. It does look like there are some promotions in there, although it also looks like most of the work has been individual contributor roles, not leadership roles. So I said before in the earlier roast, if you're going to be an older applicant, they want you to at least bring management experience, and OP doesn't have that. So not ideal again. No mention of extracurriculars at all. No
Yeah,
kids and no extracurriculars.
a bit of a theme we're seeing today. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So that's not ideal. I don't like the goals either. Um, this looks to me like a classic case of I don't know what I want to do. I want to make some money, so I want to apply to consult. I want to say I'm going to go into consulting. The school's going to see right through that, and yeah, it's a bad goal. And so all of this combined, pretty generic profile. I'm not surprised with the outcome at all. And so I guess your next question is answer this question.
Yeah.
I would bite Johnson's hand off. Easiest decision of my day. You've got
Hmm.
70K scholar. You have a 2.5 GPA and a 70K scholarship, and you're wondering whether you should take it. Grab it.
Mm-hmm. Not reapply in hopes for full ride, because OP does say that they don't want 100K in debt at this age.
You are, with that GPA, you're lucky to get any scholarship at all.
Hmm.
Why are you expecting a full ride? That's wild. That's level of expectation that, yeah, I'm surprised at. I'm surprised at.
OP, you did mention, thought my odds were high due to a high GRE and extra classes.
I think OP's overclubbed the importance of the GRE. It definitely helps, and there's the reason why he's been considered by these schools. But 10 years of individual contributor roles and a 2.5 GPA, and he's managed to secure 70K of scholarship money from Johnson.
Yeah.
It's a great result. Grab it.
Yeah.
almost wasted effort typing all that out. Like,
One of the
that's such a good offer.
one of
And
the
if you don't want
comments,
to get 100 grand of debt, don't do an MBA. Right? If you can't
yeah,
afford to do an MBA from a decent school with a 70 grand scholarship, then don't do an MBA. Stay in work.
yeah. hmm Do you want to go through the comments a bit?
Is he
They-
getting slated? I actually haven't looked at them. What are they saying?
Buddy, you have a 2.5 and you got into Johnson with a fat merit scholarship. You take that
Take
and
that
you
and run like a
run.
bandit. I'm going to upvote that comment. Absolutely. Absolutely right. And this one is saying the same thing. Getting into Johnson with 70K despite the low GPA is commendable. I thought maybe I was being a bit harsh or a bit direct, but absolutely everybody, it looks like. Take Johnson. That's a great
Yeah. And
outcome. Literally everybody is saying the same thing as me in some way or another.
there's one that just says, Welcome to Cornell.
Absolutely right. It's it's
No brainer.
it's it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. We'll add our comment to the masses here, but yeah, I don't think I'm gonna I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. I'm not on my own.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
All
that's
right.
conclusive.
We've
Okay,
answered
OP.
Obi's question,
I
as
know
have
I
many.
know we roasted you a little bit there, but seriously, well done. Like really, really well done. That's a great outcome given your stats. So go for it.
Yeah, yeah. All
Next
right.
profile.
Next profile. Okay. Part-time MBA chances at Kellogg or Booth with a
Uh-huh.
15 GMAT. All right. So now this is the opposite of our last profile. Indian male, 8 years of work experience, currently an AI engineering lead at a large health insurance company. Joined 4 years ago as an engineer, received two promotions. Work focused on LLMs and AI applications in healthcare. Undergrad is a 3.6 equivalent GPA with an upward trend, and master's is a 3.9 GPA. But the GMAT is a 615. So OP here now is a high GPA and low GMAT.
Hmm.
OP was also the volunteer organizer or project lead for an internal Chicago Employee Council committee, was also part of a drama team in college. OP also has a disability, which might be relevant to his story. Goals, not trying to pivot careers, want to grow into healthcare AI or analytics leadership roles within my company and industry. I connected with a top rated admissions consultant. He told me my chances were low with a 615 as an Indian engineering male, and that I should retake the GMAT or consider the EA. I have never felt this demoralized ever. What do you? That's our second one today. What do you?
Okay. Yeah, let's look at it high level first then. Right, demographics. Indian male engineer, very ORM, definitely. And about 8 years of work experience, sort of on the higher end in terms of work experience as well. Fine. No surprises there. But the Indian male engineer factor is less of a big deal for a part-time MBA program.
Mhm.
Why is that? Part-time MBA program requires basically for you to be based in Chicago or nearby because you're going in and out kind of while working. You can't do that by flying and whatever. So it means that basically it looks to me like this candidate is already in Chicago. Now,
Mm.
the reason why Indian male engineers are is a challenging profile is because there are a billion Indian male engineers in India applying to US MBA programs. But how many in Chicago?
Yeah.
Not quite, not so many, right? So actually, of the pool of people who OP is up against, which is basically the Chicago-based workers, people working in Chicago, yes, some of them are going to be Indian, some of them are going to be male, but a lot of them aren't. It's not as much of a challenge for
Mhm.
part-time MBA programs. In other words, if he's already got work permit in America,
Yeah.
then he's not up against the whole visa challenge, which is another reason Indian male engineers have a headwind. So it's just not as big of a thing, basically, is what I'm saying. So that's on the demographic perspective. Now, academic 3.6 equivalent. It's because it's from India and so OP has converted that to a GPA. The schools will not do that because that doesn't feature into the ranking because it's not actually on a 4.0 scale, but they will look at it and think, okay, this guy's clearly smart. So it's definitely helpful. On the other hand, the 615 GMAT, sorry, is not great, but it's only 20 points below the average for Kellogg, right? That's not a train wreck. That's certainly not worth been the most demoralized you've ever been ever, stop being a drama queen. Like it's 20 points. Like, yeah, maybe try it again, get it higher. But if you don't torpedo your whole application for the sake of 20 points of your GMAT. It's not worth it. You've got a lot of good professional stuff here to focus on
Yeah.
that will position you strongly. I'm not saying you're guaranteed shoe in for these programs. It's not worth giving up. Let's talk about the professional side. Right. Very, very sexy industry is the main thing, right? Actually implementing AI in the healthcare space. That's really, really nice. Schools will love to have you in the cohort from the perspective for the perspective that you bring. One. Two, you've had promotions and strong performance awards. So you're basically, I don't want to say best in class, but you're up there in terms of your career in your industry segment. So that's really, really strong. Extracurriculars, drama team in undergrad. Okay, that's undergrad. Doesn't carry as much weight, but it's still helpful. And a volunteer organizer project lead for the employee council committee. This is interesting stuff. And there might be a way of linking together the volunteering extracurriculars, maybe with the disability narrative as well, potentially. So there's lots of ways this could be framed very nicely. I think from an extracurricular perspective, OP's in a very good spot. So overall, pretty much everything in this profile is good, except for the GMAT, which is only 20 points below the average. So I think good start.
So you're saying not to take the GMAT and apply later. In the January intake is what OP is considering, but apply now in the in this round?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's my assumption here is that OP has already given it his best shot on the GMAT and is already scoring up there where this score is around what he was scoring in the practice tests. Because otherwise he wouldn't have felt demoralized. If OP knew he'd scored a 705 in his practice test and he just had a bad day, he wouldn't be as demoralized as this. So my assumption is that he's demoralized because he thinks that's his final score and he can't get in with it. Assuming it is his final score, I think he can get in with it. So
Okay. And
it's not to
sorry.
say a higher score wouldn't be beneficial. It would be, but if you haven't got time and this is the score that you're kind of that's consistent with your past tests, apply with it.
Okay. Kellogg's deadline is June the 3rd, so you've got 1 month, OP.
Get on with it.
Yeah. What
Absolutely
else
get on with it.
in that time?
I think the thing that stands out to me, as I said, the professional journey is really, really strong here. And I think that as an AI engineering lead, there's probably some good leadership experience in there. And my point would be, I mean, there's only a month, right? OP's not going to start some new extracurricular or whatever now. Or, he's not going to get promoted likely in the next couple of weeks. So this is the thing to lean into. I would say the biggest strength in the profile and the thing that you can like short-term affect is framing that in a really management-y way. Right? Make sure that the top bullet point of your resume is led team of 4 engineers to develop X worth Y dollars.
Yeah.
Boom. So really focusing on the leadership side of the profile.
Yeah. I also think that healthcare narrative is very interesting because OP works in healthcare. And he does say that the disability might be relevant to that story.
Absolutely.
So tying that in.
Absolutely. I'm imagining a career essay that begins with a personal story that links to the disability somehow. That's why I decided to work in healthcare. And within healthcare, the most impactful opportunity I can see is AI. That's why I've done this, this, and this. And after the MBA, I want to do that. And you've got your career narrative laid out, and it makes perfect sense to the listener. I totally understand why you would want to do that. And you're halfway to a part-time MBA program at an M7.
Okay. All right. All the very best, OP.
Best of luck, OP.
Yeah. Are we ready for our bonus question for today?
Yeah, let's see.
Okay. Can you make a complete career change after your MBA if you don't like your current career? Like go from circus clown to investment banking. Okay, big stretch. I'm hoping to use my MBA to make a 180 career change rather than advance my current career. Say that you have a bachelor's in musical theatre and are currently a professional clown at a circus. Just hypothetically, can you use your MBA to gain basic finance, accounting, and business skills, so treated like a BBA, in the hopes of leaving the clown field, the very respectable clown field, to go into banking or high finance? Hope he was admitted to Ohio State. And there's a little PS, the little note in there saying that I'm not
Not
actually a
not
clown.
actually a clown.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Thanks for clearing that up. Okay. I've got a couple of thoughts on this that I've already written down and just sort of they're not particularly structured. So just thinking aloud. I mean, the first one is yes, an MBA is the best way to pivot from something that is a non what would we call it? Maybe a blue collar job, potentially we could call it, to a white collar job. I think that's one socially correct way of saying it. But in this case, to pivot from being a clown to business, an MBA would be a great way to do that. So I definitely, from the outset, are definitely positive on it. But big buts here. The difference, whether you make it in both the MBA application itself and also in the job interviews afterwards, the job applications at the end of your MBA when you start to try and apply to banking, for example, is to draw a connection between your work before and your next job. If that gap is too big, you're not going to be able to make the pivot. That will affect, obviously, your MBA chances, and it'll affect your job application chances later. Let me give you an idea, a slightly silly example of how you could frame your clown experience in investment banking applications, right? One, marketing experience, right? Your marketing experience from being a clown, where you had to promote all your own shows, for example. You had to create customer loyalty programs, for example. That is relevant in a business setting as well. So tell that story of the marketing initiative you led. One. Another example is communication. I'm not a massive fan of clowns personally, but I think the idea of being on stage and having the charisma and the communication skills to address a large audience, that is a communication skill that needs to be refined and has been honed and trained. And that communication skill is again relevant to business school. Another one, and I've just come up with this, I haven't got this written down, is OP. If you are an experienced clown, you are possibly the lead clown in your troupe of clowns. And you've perhaps had leadership responsibility in that environment, whether that's motivating the other clowns, whether that's crisis management. When one of the clowns got eaten by a bear, you had to quickly replace that clown with another clown. And that crisis leadership is directly relevant to your MBA application and the job applications afterwards. So the business school and the kind of white collar industry need to look at your previous experience in a way that, oh yeah, that's relevant to us. Yeah. That is going to be absolutely key. Now, a couple of other points I would say is how much of a pivot you are able to make with an MBA depends a lot on the debt and financial flexibility that you have when you graduate. So what I mean by that is if you graduate with a ton of debt because you've gone on lots of trips during your MBA and you've paid all your tuition with debts and blah, 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 and you graduate and you desperately need a job urgently, and it has to be high paying to cover the debt, and it says you have to be in this city, that is the most difficult way to make a pivot. Because basically, the first job that comes up is going to be a clown job. And you're going to be like, oh my God, the bank's calling me. I've got to pay this debt back. And you're just going to go. And you're not going to make the pivot. For you to then have the patience and the time to apply to banking jobs and successfully make that pivot, you need to be financially flexible. And so the debt side is a big part of this. I have no idea about the financial side of OP's profile, but if there's any way to, manage that flexibility, make yourself financially flexible beforehand, that will be really important. And the other thing that matters here is signposting. If you are genuinely going to pivot into investment banking, it is expected that you have already started making that pivot pre-MBA. For example, already networking with investment bankers and having coffee chats, so that in an interview they might ask, "So, what have you started doing to pivot to make your pivot into MBA into investment banking successful?" "Oh, well, I've had conversations with X and with the VP at so and so bank, and he said this and introduced me to this person. So I spoke to them and they said I need to take this certificate." And that's the other thing that you can do, is take courses, whether it's Wall Street, I think it's Wall Street Oasis, etc. There's lots of investment banking focused certificates that you can take. And these, plus the networking, show the business school or the future employer that you are serious about making this transition. And then there is a chance that you'll be able to successfully pivot from something that is completely unrelated to business into a business environment.
Yeah. Yeah. If the comments are also full of non-traditional backgrounds, applicants from
Mm.
all kinds, doctors, education,
Just be a
educators.
clown at the bank.
Yeah.
Aren't
There's
those in
newspaper.
abundance already? Yeah. Designed for career switchers. This comment is roughly right.
Yeah.
IB recruiting from Ohio State will be harder. That's also fair. Hey, good comment there. I'll give that an upvote as well. So I think generally people are aligned with what I said.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody said you want to turn jester maxing into money maxing. Very I don't know if you know of that word max. Oh.
I'll give it an upvote. I think I get it. I think it maximizing, I think is what it means. Yeah.
It's
Fine.
Gen Alpha
Showing my age here. This is great hairs. Not spending enough time on Reddit, clearly. I think generally though, this person is on the right, it is on the right track. I would say the key thing here is going to be networking and getting a few other certifications under his belt to be able, or her belt, to be able to make that transition successfully.
And someone said if you can make a room full of people laugh, you can take client meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying about the communication skills, right?
Yeah.
There are transferable skills for sure.
Yeah.
Going to need to work on framing them. And that's hopefully what the careers team at Ohio State will be able to help you with. But yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you for that roast, Sam. That's all of our profiles for today.
Awesome stuff. Well, if you've enjoyed today's roast and you're looking for an admissions consultant, get in touch. We are taking on round one clients right now. And if you enjoyed us just generally roasting people without being asked, then feel free to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So stay in touch. And yeah, Mel, until next week.
All right. Until next week.
Roast you later. See ya.